Hey, what's up, tennis players? Thank you for being back with us here at Entourage Tennis. Today, we are joined by one of the hottest tennis coaching figures in the world. This guy has brought some revelations that you need to listen to that's going to improve your practice time and help you win more matches. His name, Craig O'Shaughnessy. Craig, first of all, thank you so much for allowing us a few minutes of inspiration.
Gustavo, my pleasure to be here with you guys.
Thank you,
Devin,
appreciate it, man.
We've had a wonderful time up here in New York, and looking forward to sharing some stories and some insights and answering any questions that you have that will help the players that you work with. So
absolutely,
let's get it on.
Let's get it on. We want to congratulate you on the recent success with the Djokovic camp by winning Australian Open. However, we know that's not your first rodeo at a Grand Slam. One of our favorite stories about you is the day Dustin Brown beat Rafa Nadal at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
What is it, or what is your role with the Dustin Brown camp back then and the Djokovic camp nowadays that has brought such huge success to these players?
When I was in college, I went to Germany during the summers and worked at a camp called the All California Tennis Camp in Barsinghausen, Germany. Dustin went there and trained there. So through the coaches that I knew from the academy, I got connected with Dustin when he was on tour. It was like, hey, this is one of our boys, go and check him out, you guys need to meet. And we became good friends. And then when 2015 Wimbledon rolled around, I was at the event working as the strategy analyst for the Wimbledon channel. And Dustin's coach, Scott Wittenberg, great friend of mine, came and stayed with us. And, we just all got chatting at the start of the tournament. Like, Dustin, if you need any help in any of these matches on opponents, I'd gladly help you out. So as it evolved and as he went through the tournament, all of a sudden it's Rafa, and I'm like, I study this guy a lot. Week in and week out, he's one of the greatest players in the history of our sport. He has very distinct patterns of play. And when we looked at it, we said, okay, Dustin had beat him before in Halle the year before. So,
That's right.
Yeah, so it was very much looking at, okay, Dustin, these are your strengths. This is what you must maximize in this match. This is Rafa's tendencies that you need to look for, and how do we negate those? So for that moment in time, the information that I could bring about the opponent and matching up and making sure that Dustin knew these are the strengths that you need in this match and you need to just keep jamming those, that was a big deal. And a lot of times on the big stage, that's the difference between winning and losing. So one of the greatest days in my coaching career to take out Rafa, one of the greatest players ever, on center court at Wimbledon.
Amazing story.
Yeah, that match jumps out. I mean,
it was nuts.
It was nuts, dude. And I remember watching that match, and you just couldn't believe your eyes. I mean, to this day, just YouTube it, guys. The highlights is uncanny, and that's a lot of thanks to this guy right here, because he's the mastermind behind it.
Well, Dustin's got to go out and do it. A lot of times players, maybe they get nervous, or maybe they get overwhelmed, or you're playing a legend, and there's a lot of different things that can go wrong. I do think the preparation that we had for Dustin is like, do this, you love doing this. And I called it organized chaos afterwards. And that's what Dustin brings. I mean, so many drop shot returns, so many stepping in and going for return winners straight down the line, so many balls attacking Rafa's forehand out wide of the deuce court. And, the drop shot lob combination, which is, for little kids, we love that. How many times, in 12s did we bring the opponent in with a drop shot and lob them and go, we've got you with this. And Dustin did that repeatedly in that match.
Yeah. Another thing that stood out from that match was the serve and volley.
Yes.
And as the match went on in the first couple of sets, it immediately gained a lot of criticism because Dustin was doing something that's regarded as something that has been lost and may never come back. How do you respond to that?
Well, here at the Congress, I did a presentation on 2002 to 2018, looking at Wimbledon numbers. And what we've traditionally done is looked at, we just count how many times it happened. And back in 2002, I think it was 33%. And lately it's dropped down to 6%. So
the frequency of serve and volley.
the frequency, how many times people are doing it, and we've lost faith in it. And I think it's a bit of crowd mentality where 5 people out of 100 will say you can't do it, and all of a sudden, 100 people saying you can't do it.
Sure.
So when you look at the decrease in the amount of serve and volley at Wimbledon, you have to agree with these people. But when you look at the win percentage, which is the most important column, it's always been the same. Whether you serve and volley a lot, whether you serve and volley a little, you win 65 to 70% of the time. Dustin's really good at it. He learns a lot of his junior tennis by going to the net at the start, by working on his volleys. He loves to serve and volley. The surface helped. Staying back against Rafa is a bad idea on any surface. So it was a perfect storm on that day, and Dustin executed the game plan to perfection.
What you're telling us is that from 2002 till now, the percentage of points won at Wimbledon when the players serve and volley has not changed.
Hasn't changed. 65, 66, 67, a 68, a 66. It's staying in such a tight range, but on the other side, it's 33% the amount of times the players do it, and then 20, and then 15, and then 6. So there's a monstrous difference in the frequency we do the tactic, and there's almost no difference in the win percentage. So if you just look at the win percentage more with things that happen in our sport, you get a much better indicator should you be doing this in your own game.
That's great. And that message that tells me right off the bat is, first of all, don't believe everything you hear or read. And also, I mean, just because a couple people say it, I mean, even some of the great tennis players have said, okay, serve and volley is dead, this or that. The numbers don't lie, and I think that's what makes Craig special, is that he's looked in depth at the numbers, and here you are, okay, just the frequency has gone down drastically, and if you didn't know the flip side of that, you would think, okay, well, there's a reason behind it, and what I'm hearing is serve and volley is still pretty relevant from a winning standpoint.
Serve and volley reigns supreme. It always has, and it always will.
Craig, let me ask you now, because we're kind of getting towards the nitty-gritty, what you really do, which is going from, I know that you've coached a lot of top touring professionals over the years.
And he hasn't even shared that he works with Novak, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. He works with Novak Djokovic, in case you've heard of him, but he's worked with the likes of, why don't you tell us some of the...
Well, when I first started out, Amir Delic was a guy that I coached for a number of years on tour, a little bit with Jesse Levine, Marcel Ilhan out of Turkey, Melinda Zink. Coaching on the tour is tough. It looks very glamorous, but if you're not doing well and you're on the other side of the world and you're on a 3-match losing streak and you've got practice time is late and things are tough. I mean, if things are great and you're sitting in Dustin's box and admiring the great work in front of you, it's the best day of your life. But coaching on tour is something that I didn't feel like I wanted to do full time. And as I've evolved into the position I do now, I had to make a decision and say, I love the Pro Tour, but I don't want to coach 30 weeks on the Pro Tour. I love the strategy of the game. I want to give it to not only the players in my academy, but I want to give it to the world. So I took the combination of my journalism degree and my coaching expertise and brought those two things together and became the analyst for the ATP Tour and for Wimbledon and the Australian Open. I write a lot for the New York Times, so I greatly enjoy writing about tennis and doing the strategy work, which opened the doors to work with such a great player as Novak. Marian Vida has always been Novak's full-time coach. Sure. There was a little period where he wasn't, but Marian does an outstanding job. There's a father figure type in there, but a brilliant tennis mind. My role is to analyze everything that's going on. So it's one part looking at opponents and coming up with a game plan against opponents. So we have, there's no surprises. You don't want to get on the court and go, I've never played this guy. What does he do? I'm down a set and a break before I figure this guy out. So there's a big part about looking to the other side of the court and knowing what's coming, knowing where to attack, knowing where to stay away from. The other part is analyzing Novak's game and in a lot of ways, teaching him what matters most. And, we think Novak having the best backhand in the world, it's okay to hit backhands. More forehands than backhands. Novak's so good at the back of the court, maybe just stay back there. Go to the net. He does very, very well at the net. Showing him that he has a far greater win percentage in the shorter rallies than the longer rallies. So it's an education even for a player at that level, because one of the things that I've learned is that, it doesn't matter if you're number one in the world, when you're in the battle, you don't have a good vision and understanding of exactly what you're doing. When you look from outside into the court and you're able to analyze it, you're able to put in a dartfish, you're able to bring the patterns of play together, you have a much better understanding. So that's something that I think has been a big part of Novak's game, is like, who am I? And I think a lot of times it's like, well, I'm the world's best backhand and I play a lot, I do well in longer grinding points. And both of those things are true.
Yeah.
But they're not the beating heart, they're not the bullseye of what makes him a great champion.
Got it. Can I ask one quick thing on that? Number one, what really stood out is, who am I? And I think, okay, Novak Djokovic, it takes growth, and it takes reflection to realize what your tennis identity is, how you want to play, how you want to be on the court. And I think you've helped him maybe be a little bit more comfortable with what that is. Well, right now we're talking about one of the best players ever to play, but I think the same principle goes for rec players, club players, whether you play once a year or whether you play 5 hours a day. It's a search for, who am I as a tennis player?
Yes.
How do I love to play tennis? Like, what makes me happy, and what's going to be successful for me on the court? So, like, based on what you've done, do you have any insight for just like your average rec player? Like, how do you discover who you are, who you should be on the court?
Yeah. The beauty of our sport, the thing to, the baseline where we start from, is that you can be successful and make the top 10 in the world if you're 6'9", like Kevin Anderson, or 5'9", like maybe a Leighton Hewitt or a Diego Schwartzman. You can be a fast runner, you can be slow, you can hit with no spin, you can hit with tons of spin, you can come in a lot, you can stay back a lot. The diversity of playing styles is a major benefit and a major plus for our sport. So what you must understand is that you don't need to be good at everything, but you've got to be good at something. So you have serving, returning, rallying, and getting to the net. So those are the four, platform areas that you say, okay, I'm a little bit more, I gravitate a little bit more to this area with my unique style. It's my speed, it's my strength, or it's my mental understanding to break down an opponent and understand what's going on. So for all of these players, don't try and be the master of everything. Figure out what you're good at and practice that. But most importantly, the research that I do at every level of the game says that the 3 rally lengths of 0 to 4 shots, 5 to 8 shots, and 9+, the winning at every level of our sport is much more prevalent in the 0 through 4 rally length, which means the first 2 times you touch a ball mean more than anything else.
We're sitting here talking about Novak and Dustin Brown and all these pro players, but people that are watching us are sitting there going, yeah, but what's there for me?
Yes.
And so you've become infamous for the concept of the first 4 shots, also known as first strike tennis.
Infamous? I like infamous. I'm a bandit.
He's a legend, yes.
So can you please share with us why we need to stop looking the other way and start listening about this theory of the 4 shots, which is not only key for pro players, but also for us playing at our clubs.
And that's statistical.
I have trouble with that word, don't worry.
And that's statistically based, which is, he's crunched the numbers, he has the evidence to show that not just on the pro tour, but also at every single level from boys and girls 12s to Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer, the highest winning percentage is in the first 4 points.
Yeah.
Is that right?
The rally length has been sitting right there in front of us since the day dot. And it's only in the last 1 to 2 years where we've gone, well, let's just count the short rallies and see how many there are. And it's a very, very big deal, and it's going to transform and make our practice courts better all over the world, because the practice court is now based off the reality of the match court. Way better way to practice and improve your game. Yeah, so there's 2 elements. First is the organization of our sport, and we love counting forehands forehand winners, forehand errors, unforced errors. We love counting serve percentage and all these things. And we've watched sport all our life. We've watched so much tennis, but we've never gone, well, that was a short rally, let's count that. And that was a longer rally, let's count that. We think because of the unforced error, which I'm not a fan of, the unforced error basically says any of these short rallies is a failure to reach the promised land of the long rally. An unforced error means you shouldn't miss in our sport, and it's completely wrong. We miss all the time. Around 70% of all points on the Pro Tour are errors. For the rec players and the adult players, it's 75 to 80%. You're going to make a lot of errors. The number one player in the world wins around 55% of all points they play. You're the best in our sport, and you lose 45% of all points you play in that season. So don't think it's a game of perfection. It is absolutely not. So when you understand the breakdown of it's around 70% of all points in 0 through 4, 20% in 5 through 8, and just 10% in 9+, you're like, wow, a lot more shorter rallies than I thought. And for our rec players, it's even shorter. It's even shorter. And what happens is you go, okay, I now know how our sport's organized, but what about the winning? So you look at the players that win their matches, and over 90% of the time, the player that won their match also won the battle of 0 through 4. They won more points than their...
Did you say 90%?
Over 90%.
Over 90%.
Over 90%. It's difficult, very difficult and unusual. There had to be something a little crazy for you to win a match and lose the 0 through 4 rally length. But the long rallies of 9+, 2 US Opens, 2015, 2016 US Open for the men, when you combine both of them, the match loser won 50% of the long rallies. So long rallies are just a coin flip. It doesn't really matter. And what we learn is that the longer the rally goes, the more even it naturally becomes.
It's more up to chance once the rally gets
Yes,
elongated.
exactly.
No matter how good you are.
No matter how good you are.
Sure.
So 2018 US Open, Novak won 132 points in 9+. He lost 131. He had a 1-point advantage over 7 matches, and he won all 7 matches. So if Novak can't forge a massive advantage in 9+, the rest of us are in trouble.
That stat, to me, like, sorry to keep repeating these things, but that stat is just staggering. So
Yes.
Novak Djokovic, just to reiterate,
Yep.
he played, what is that, about 250 points in the Open that are over 9 shots.
Yes.
And you picture 9-ball plus rallies, you picture Novak playing.
Sliding.
You're like, dude, the guy's unbeatable in that. He won 132,
Yep.
and he lost 131.
Yep.
He was dead even in that stat. And to me, that's something that without this kind of insight, I would have guessed 75-25, frankly.
And he was plus 120 in 0 through 4.
And he was plus 120 up in 0 through 4, and that's how he won the Open.
That's how he won the Open.
Honestly, had I known this data when I was in college, my practices would have looked completely different. How many times did you go out there during a college practice and just hit down the middle for like 30 to 40 minutes before you actually decided to play some points and then hit some serves?
Yeah, and
Countless.
Oh, I had a couple serves, couple of returns. Oh, I'm good. Okay, thanks. Flip it back to, the majority of tennis players who don't happen to be in the top 100 in the world. How can you use this finding, which is, okay, the player that wins more of the first 4 shot rallies, how can you use that data to their advantage? I mean, do you tell them to serve and volley? Like, what's the mindset behind it?
Great question. So as soon as I saw this, that exact question, I'm about 5 minutes in, I'm at the 2015 Australian Open. I'm looking at all this new data on the bottom of these spreadsheets. I go, okay, well, let me look at 80 matches from the tournament, put it all together. I realize it's 70-20-10. I'm like, I had no idea. So first of all, I'm like, wow, this changes the way I view the sport. But secondly, I sat back for a second. I'm like, our practice court is broken in half, because we are spending 90% of our time working on consistency when we look at 10% of the points are actually long rallies. We have overdosed on consistency, where we have gone all in. We're like, be more consistent, shot tolerance, repetition, 100 balls cross court. We have tried to be the most consistent players on the planet, and what has it delivered? 10% long rallies. So it just doesn't match. What you now must do is let the match data dictate how you practice. So we're going to shrink the amount of consistency work we're going to do because we can't find more time. We've got to shrink our rallying of forehands and backhands mindlessly, endlessly. We've got to add more specific serve work, more second serve work. Second serves are the gateway to getting broken. Second serves are the gateway to losing matches. Question for you at home. How often do you go and work only on your second serves? Can you say, can I make 10 second serves in a row? And can I do that every single day for a few months? It'll be a great way for you to win more matches. And lastly, in this area, as a younger coach, before I learned all this data, I would do one-shot sequences where my player would just hit a serve. Now it's always a two-shot sequence. You hit the serve, and I feed the return, and you hit the serve plus one forehand. So it's, if you do this, you get that. So as a younger coach, I would have one ball in my hand and feed it and evaluate. Now I have two balls in my hand, and I give you that, and I give you that. So that's how it's helped me coach players, I think, in a better way.
Hey Craig, I want to ask you what stats in tennis may have surprised you the most from all the numbers you've crunched?
The first thing that stood out to me is the mode. When we discovered, and we asked so many people, 2015 Australian Open Coaches Conference, I got 250 coaches there. I asked them what is the most common rally length in tennis, and the most common answer is you get a few threes, but you get a ton of fours and a ton of fives and some sixes and some sevens. It doesn't really go past 8, but it's in that. It's, you know, the heart of it is 4. 4 is 400% off. The most common rally length in tennis is 1. The serve goes in, it doesn't come back. It's 30% of our sport, and when you look at the return of serve on our practice courts all over the world, it is by far the least practiced shot. So that blew me away.
People at home are wondering, how can they dive deeper into this data and improve their own games? Is there some kind of resource out there that they can acquire? Absolutely. And where can they get that?
It's called my website.
Oh, okay. What's the name of your website?
BrainGameTennis.com.
And what do you have on there exactly?
I've got 8 courses on there, but I do a lot of writing for the ATP. If you go into the ATPWorldTour.com website, go to the stats page. I do a lot of Infosys stories on there.
Sure.
I have stories within the New York Times, so I like to bring in those 2 areas a lot of new research to our game, and the more that you can read those stories and have exposure to the new way of looking to our sport, it's only going to help your game. Start with the first question, which is, who am I? What are my strengths? What do I do well? And not only what do I do well, but it's what do I enjoy doing?
Correct. Yeah.
You know, I love to serve and volley.
Yes.
I grew up on grass courts in Australia. I love to do it. I don't care if I'm on a clay court or a hard court. It brings me joy to hit a serve. The lefty can open. I'm coming in. You give me a backhand volley. I carve it off. I'm like, you know, endorphins are going off in my brain. It's like, this is why I love the sport. So when you look at, just take a Grand Slam event, you've got 128 players, you've got 127 matches, and there are players that are tall, that are just banging serves, and there's players that are shorter, that are, you know, it's more about the return, and there's players that are faster, that run all day. You know, we've got a lot of different game styles, but at the end of the day, you look at the win percentages and how our sport's organized, and it stays so similar through all the different levels. So we've got a special guest. Come and join us. Come and sit down, Brayden. Great to see you. Great to see you. Do you have 2 minutes for us?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I'm Brayden. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
I am so freaking happy.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
We're here in New York, walking on his own, unassuming, in the background, a young Canadian man who qualified at this tournament and is going to play this afternoon in his first ATP final. Exactly. Wonderful to start. Brayden Schnur. Brayden, great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
I came to North Carolina a couple of years ago. I like the Tar Heels hat.
Yeah.
What do you remember from those presentations that is helping power your rise on the ATP Tour?
Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing you emphasized for me in my game style was to have conviction on the serve and return, how important it is to start the point. And I feel like, the game's developed into, tennis has set so many big, tall guys out there now that for us it's important to keep our game style and really realize that, this is how we're going to play. Also, I think the in-between point routine has helped me a lot, just being able to kind of flush out all the bad emotions or whatever you're feeling after maybe a negative point, and just being able to move on and focus on the next point. I think that's really, over the last couple of weeks, has helped me and my game progress a lot.
That's amazing.
What are we going to see today? You've got Riley Opelka, who's 7'11", maybe not quite that tall. Have you played him before?
We practiced for the first time in Dallas last week.
Okay.
We've hit once together. Obviously, are pretty familiar with each other, being on the Challenger Tour for a while. He's jumped up a little bit in the top 100 as of end of last year. But obviously, I'm expecting him to hit some big serves, hit some big groundies. But for me, going to this match, I think I need to focus on myself and focus on the serve. Be patient, not get frustrated. Obviously, there's going to be games where I'm not going to see any returns. But be patient and wait for my time, and I think I'll have a chance or two, hopefully.
Craig, would you mind if I ask a question about returns?
Please.
I'm fascinated by Rafa's strategy to back up all the way where you can barely see his shoulders. It's just head on TV. And so I wonder, from a coach's perspective and a top player's perspective, is that strategy applicable to us and to you?
I think everyone's different. I think it's what you're used to. I think Rafa does that all the time, regardless of who he's playing for the most part.
Sure. So you're basically saying there's no backing up
for me
against the buck.
Obviously, maybe a couple steps, but I don't think you're going to see me in the back fence today.
Gotcha.
We'll see how he's serving. Obviously, I might have to adjust, but I don't think I'm not used to returning that far back, so I'm not going to change anything dramatically.
Coach, any golden nuggets on that?
Yeah, exactly. You've formed your game style. You know where you feel comfortable on the court. You've played big servers before, and it's all about blocking and rebounding and defending and getting into the point. You just want to have the goal of going out there and breaking in one time a set. And if a few of those other games go to love, who cares? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously it's a great point. It's a great strategy going into it. I kind of have a similar strategy, that I've talked to with my coach about that sort of thing. These guys, you can't always make them play. You got to go after the returns and hit them. And you want to know what, if sometimes they don't see returns coming back on the first ball, they're not hitting balls, so they're losing rhythm at the same time. So go after it, go big or go home.
I don't know if you were down match point, but I know it was real tight in that match.
You were, weren't you? You saved a match point somewhere.
Two or three, I think, at 5-4, 15-40.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly, and I just, from there to playing, I think you've had at least another 3-setter in this event, just the amount of adversity you dealt with and just staying tough, staying cool in those inevitable moments that we're going to face as tennis players, particularly to make it to the higher parts of the tournament, particularly when you're coming up. It's inevitable that you're going to be dealing with tight situations, and I just have to say I'm really impressed with how you managed that. You just got right back up, and now here you are in the finals. So it's just a great message to all the players that just to be able to stay tough and be able to roll with it. So I've been pumped to watch that.
Well, how exactly do you do it, though?
Focus on the next point, I think, is the biggest thing. One point at a time, that's what I'm going to do today.
So cliche, but so true.
It really helps, And it's funny, I actually watched that Beyond Borg movie. They say it in there all the time, just whatever happens at the previous point doesn't matter, just focus on the next point. And it kind of really hit home, so since then, just kind of locked in. So thank you guys so much for having me.
We appreciate you.
It's great.
We pulling for you?
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you.
Thank you for crashing our interview.
Take it easy, guys.
Bye.
The court crashes just got crashed.
So, Craig, I think you said you're familiar with our show Court Crashers. You've caught an episode or two where we're going around to the public parks trying to jump in on some action and give free unsolicited tennis advice. Novak Djokovic, you think that's a crashable court right there?
100% yes.
And if we crash his court, calling him out, what do we need to get rag him out about?
I'd leave the backhand alone.
Backhand's okay.
I'd leave the backhand alone. The forehand's doing well. He is coming to the net a little bit more. I'd like to see his grip a little further over. So I would feed him some low volleys, make him put a couple into the net and go, we need to fix this, Novak.
If you're watching this, we're coming for you, bud, but don't worry, it's on us, okay? Couple-hour lesson on us.
Mr. Vida, we're not going to take your job. Don't worry, you're good. But Novak, you're getting called out. Craig, hell of a time with you, man. Unbelievable insights. Always a pleasure to catch up with you. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure to catch up with you guys.
Sure thing. Guys, make sure to check out his website. The stats alone are astonishing. Like, just hearing what he had to say, even in the confines of this interview, really shaped how I think about tennis points, and it's just like really eye-opening.
Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be sure to leave all the links and supporting documentations to this interview down below in the description. Head over there, let us know what you think about these revelations, and we're happy to help you out. We'll see you next time. Thank you again for watching Entourage Tennis.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Gustavo. Peace out.